Hey everyone, Razzbowski here, and welcome back to the Five Nights at Freddy's novel. We're moving on to Chapter 3 today, so if you guys are hyped, then please hit that like button. Thank you all so much. Real quick, before we start off, thank you all so much for the kind words and support shown over this series so far. It's absolutely incredible to hear how much you are loving this series. I mean, I'm getting messages daily saying, Razz, hurry up and read the next one. So hey, let's do it. Let's hurry up and read the next chapter. Chapter 3. Okay, get those buzz prepared. Thud, thud, thud. Charlie startled out of sleep, disoriented. Something was banging on her door, trying to force its way in. Oh, for goodness sake, Jessica said grumpily, and Charlie blinked and sat up. Right, the Motel hurricane. Someone was knocking on the door. As Jessica went to answer the door, Charlie got out of bed and looked at the clock. It was 10 a.m. She looked out of the window at the bright new day. She had slept worse than usual, not nightmares, but dark dreams she could not quite remember, things that stuck with her just beyond the back of her mind, images she could not catch. Charlie! Someone was screeching. Charlie went to the door and found herself immediately enveloped in a hug, Marla's plump arms gripping her like a vice. Charlie hugged her back, tighter than she meant to. When Marla let go, she stepped back, grinning. Marla's moods had always been so intense that they were contagious, spreading out to whoever was in her path. When she was gloomy, a pall fell over her friends, the sun gone behind her cloud. When she was happy, like now, it was impossible to avoid the lift of her joy. She was always breathless, always slightly scattered, always giving the impression that she was running late, though she almost never was. Marla was wearing a loose, dark red blouse, and it suited her well, setting off her fair skin and dark brown hair. Charlie had kept in better touch with Marla than the others. Marla was the type who made it easy to stay friends, even at a distance. Even as a little kid, she was always sending letters and postcards, undeterred if Charlie hadn't responded to every one. She was resolutely positive, and assumed that everyone liked her unless they made it clear otherwise, using the proper expletives. Charlie admired that about her. She herself, though, not shy, was always calculating. Does that person like me? Are they just being polite? How do people tell the difference? Marla had come to visit her once when they were 12. She had charmed Charlie's aunt and made fast friends with her school friends, whilst still making it abundantly clear that she was Charlie's friend, and she was only here to see Charlie. Marla's gigantic smile turned serious as she studied Charlie, peering at her as if trying to spot the differences since they last met. You're as pale as ever. She took Charlie's hand in her own. And you're all clammy. Don't you ever get warm? She dropped Charlie's hands and proceeded to study the motel room skeptically, as though uncertain exactly what it was. It's the luxury suite, Jessica said without expression as she searched for something in her bag. Her hair was sticking up in all directions, and Charlie stifled a smile. It was nice to see something about Jessica in disarray for once. Jessica found her hairbrush and held it up triumphantly. Ha! Take that, morning frizz! Come on in, Charlie said, realizing she and Marla were still in the doorway. The door wide open. Marla nodded. Oh, 1 second. Jason! She shouted out the door. No one emerged. Jason! A young boy came trotting up from the road. He was short and wiry, darker skinned than his half-sister. His Batman t-shirt and black shorts were made for someone twice his size. His hair was cut close to his head and his arms and legs were streaked with dirt. Were you playing on the road? Marla demanded. No, he said. Yes, you were. Don't do that. If you got yourself killed, Mum's gonna blame me. Get inside. Marla shoved her little brother inside and shook her head. How old are you now? Charlie asked. 11, Jason said. He went to the TV and started fiddling with the buttons. Jason, stop it, Marla said. Play with your action figures. I'm not a little kid, he said. Anyways, they're in the car. But he stepped away from the television and went to look out the window. Marla rubbed her eyes. We just got here. We had to leave at 6 this morning, and someone, she said pointedly, glancing over her shoulder at Jason, wouldn't stop fiddling with the radio. I am so tired. She didn't seem tired, but then she never did. At their sleepovers as kids, Charlie remembered her bouncing around like a maniac while the rest of them were winding down for the night, then falling asleep abruptly like a cartoon character who had been hit over the head with a rolling pin. We should get ready, Jessica said. We're supposed to meet the guys at the diner in an hour. Hurry, Marla said. We have to change too, and I don't want to get all gross while we are driving. Jason, you can watch TV, Charlie said, and he looked at Marla. She nodded, and he grinned and turned it on, starting to flip through the channels. Please just pick a channel, Marla said. Charlie headed into the bathroom to get dressed, while Jessica fussed with her hair. A little less than an hour later, they pulled into the dining parking lot. The others were already there, in the same booth as they had been in the night before. When they got inside, Marla performed the second round of squeals and hugs, only slightly quieter now that they were in public. Overshadowed by her enthusiasm, Lamar stood and waved at Jessica and Charlie, waiting until Marla sat down. "Hi guys," he said at last. He was wearing a dark tie and dark grey suit. He was tall, thin, black, with his hair shaved close to his head. His features were sharp and attractive, and he looked just a little older than the rest of them. It could have been the suit, but Charlie thought it was something about the way he stood, holding himself like he would be comfortable wherever he was. They had all dressed up a little for the ceremony. Marla had changed at the motel, and she and Jessica were both wearing dresses. Jessica's was knee-length and covered in pastel flowers, a light fabric that moved as she walked. Marla's was simple, white with big sunflowers splashed over the fabric. Charlie hadn't thought to bring a dress, and she hoped that she didn't look out of place in black pants and a white button-down shirt. John was wearing a light purple shirt today, though he'd added a matching tie in a slightly darker colour, and Carlton seemed to be wearing an identical outfit as before, still all in black. They all sat down. "Well, don't we all look nice?" Marla said happily. "Where's Jason?" Jessica craned her head from side to side. Marla groaned. "I'll be right back." She scooted out of the booth and hurried out of the door. "Lamar, what have you been up to?" Charlie said. He grinned. "He's an Ivy League man," Carlton said, teasing. Lamar looked briefly down at the table, but he was smiling. "Early acceptance," was all he said. "Which one?" Jessica said. "Cornell." "Wait, how did you already apply to college?" Charlie said. "That's not until next year. I don't even know where I'm going to go." "He skipped the 6th grade, John said. There was a brief flicker of something across his face, and Charlie knew what it was. John liked being the clever one, the precocious one. Lamar had always been kind of a goof-off when they were kids, and now he had leapt ahead. John forced a grin, and the moment passed. "Congratulations," he said, with no hint that it was not entirely sincere. Marla came bursting in again, this time towing Jason behind her, holding onto his upper arm. At the hotel, she had made him change as well into a blazer and khakis, though he was still wearing his Nikes. "I'm coming! Stop it!" he whined. "Is that Jason?" Carlton said. "Yeah," Jason said. "Do you remember me?" Carlton said. "I don't remember any of you," Jason said unapologetically. "Sit there," Marla said, pointing to the booth next to them. "Okay," he grumbled. "Marla, he can sit with us," Jessica said. "Jason, come on over." "I want to sit here," he said, and sat down behind them. He pulled a video game out of his pocket and was oblivious to the world. The waitress came over and they ordered. Marla told her to put Jason's breakfast on their check. When their food came, Charlie checked her watch. "We don't have a lot of time," she said. "We'll get there," Carlton said. "It's not far." A small piece of food fell out of his mouth as he gestured down the road. "Have you been back to the school?" Lamar said, and Carlton shrugged. "I pass it sometimes. I know this is a nostalgia trip for all of you, but I just live here. I don't exactly go around reminiscing about kindergarten all the time." They were all quiet for a second, the beeps and pings of Jason's video game filling the silence. "Hey, did you know Lamar's going to Cornell next year?" Jessica said to Marla. "Really? Well, aren't you ahead of the pack?" she said. He looked down at his plate, and when he looked up again, he was a little flushed. "All part of the 5-year plan," he said. They laughed, and his blush deepened. "It's kind of weird to be back here," he said, hastily changing the subject. "I think it's strange that I'm the only one who still lives here," Carlton said. "Nobody ever leaves Hurricane." "It is strange, though," Jessica said thoughtfully. "My parents, you remember my mom's from New York originally. She used to joke about going back. When I go back to New York, but it might as well have been when I win the lottery. She didn't mean it. And then the night after right after, she stopped joking about it. And then 3 months later, we were all on a plane to visit her sister in Queens, and we never came back. My dad's father died when I was 9, and they came back to Hurricane for the funeral without me. They didn't want me coming back here, and honestly, I didn't want to go. I was kind of anxious the whole time they were gone. I kept looking out the window, hoping they would come back early, like something bad was going to happen to them if they had stayed." They looked at each other, considering. Charlie knew that they had all moved, all but Carlton, but she had never thought about it. People moved all the time. Carlton was right, though. People didn't leave Hurricane. "We moved away because my dad got a new job the summer after 3rd grade, John said. "That's not exactly mysterious. Lamar, you left in the middle of the semester that year." "Yeah," he said. "But that's because my parents split. I went with my mom to Indianapolis." He frowned. "My parents left because of Michael," Marla said. They all turned to her. Afterward, my mom couldn't sleep. She said the spirits were stirring in the town unquiet. My dad told her she was being ridiculous, but we left as fast as we could. Marla looked around at her friends. What? She said defensively. I don't believe in ghosts. I do, Charlie said. She felt like she was talking from a great distance, was almost surprised they could hear her. I mean, not ghosts, but memories. I think they linger whether there's someone there or not. The house, her old house, was imbued with memories, with loss, with longing. It hung in the air like humidity. The walls were saturated, like the wood had soaked it in. It had been there before she came. It was there now. It would be there forever. It had to be. There was too much, too great and vast a weight for Charlie to have brought it with her. That doesn't make any sense, Jessica said. Memory is in our brains, like literally stored in our brains, and you can see it on a scan. It doesn't exist outside a person's mind. I don't know, John said. Think of all the places that have atmosphere, old houses, sometimes places where you walk in and feel sad or nostalgic, even when you've never been there before. That's not other people's memories, though, Lamar said. That's subconscious cues, stuff we don't realize we're noticing that tells us we should feel some way. Peeling paint, old-fashioned furniture, lace curtains, details that tell us to be nostalgic. Mostly things we pick up from movies, probably. I got lost in a carnival when I was 4. I never got so scared in my life. But I don't think anybody's feeling suddenly desperate for their mom when they pass that Ferris wheel. Maybe they are, Marla said. I don't know. Sometimes I have little moments when there's, like, something I've forgotten. Something I regret or that I'm happy about. Or something that makes me want to cry. But it's only there for a split second and then it's gone. Maybe we're all shedding our fear and regret and hope everywhere we go and catching up traces of peoples we've never met. Maybe it's everywhere. How is that different from believing in ghosts? Lamar said. It's totally different, Marla said. It's not supernatural and it's not like the souls of dead people. It's just people leaving their mark on the world. So it's the ghosts of living people, Lamar said. No, you're talking about people having some kind of essence that can hang around a specific place after the person is gone, Lamar said. That's a ghost. No, it's not. I'm not saying it right, Marla said. She closed her eyes for a minute thinking, okay. She said at last, do you all remember my grandmother? I do, said Jason. She was my grandmother too. She was my dad's mom, not yours, Marla said. Anyway, you were only a year old when she died. I do remember her, Jason said quietly. Okay, Marla said. So, she collected dolls from the time she was a kid. She and my grandfather used to travel a lot after he retired, and she'd bring them back from all over the world. She had them from France, Egypt, Italy, Brazil, China, everywhere. She kept them in her own special room, and it was full of them. Shelves and shelves of dolls, some tiny and some almost as big as I was. I loved it. One of my earliest memories is playing in that room with the dolls. I remember my dad would always warn me to be careful, and my grandmother would laugh and say, toys should be played with. I had a favourite, a 21-inch red-haired doll in a short, shiny white dress like Shirley Temple. I called her Maggie. She was from the 1940s and I loved her. I told her everything, and when I was lonely, I would imagine myself in that room playing with Maggie. My grandmother died when I was 6, and my dad and I went to see my grandfather after the funeral. He told me I should pick one of the dolls and keep it from the collection. I went to the room to get Maggie, and as soon as I walked through the door, something was wrong. It was as though the light had changed, become darker, harsher than it used to be. I looked around and the lively, playful poses of the dolls now seemed unnatural, disjointed. It was as though all of them were staring at me. I didn't know what they wanted. Maggie was in the corner, and I took a step towards her, then stopped. I met her eyes, and instead of painted glass, I saw a stranger. I turned and ran. I raced down the hall as though something might be chasing me, not daring to look back until I reached my father's side. He asked if I had picked a doll, and I just shook my head. I never went back to that room. Everyone was silent. Charlie was transfixed, still seeing little Marla running for her life. What happened to the dolls? Carlton said, only half breaking the spell. I don't know. I think my mum sold them to another collector when my grandfather died, Marla said. Sorry, Marla, Lamar said. It's all just tricks of the mind. You missed your grandmother and you were frightened of death, and dolls are inherently freaky. Charlie broke in, wanting to head off an argument. Is everyone done eating? She said. We have to go soon. We still have plenty of time. Carlin looked down at his watch. It's like 5 minutes away. Something else fell out of his mouth, landing next to the first dropped bit of food. John looked around the table, from person to person, as though he were waiting for something. We have to tell them, he said, looking at Charlie. Oh yeah, we totally do, Jessica said. Tell us what? Jason popped up, peeking over the back of Marla's seat. Shh, Marla said half-heartedly. She was looking at John. Tell us what? John dropped his voice, forcing everyone to lean in closer. Charlie did it too, eager to hear, even though she knew exactly what he was going to say. We went to Freddy's last night, he said. Freddy's is still there? Marla exclaimed too loud. Shh, Jessica said, making frantic hand movements. Sorry, Marla whispered. I just can't believe it's still there. It's not, Carlton said, raising his eyebrows and grinning enigmatically at Lamar. It's hidden, John explained. They were supposed to knock it down and build a mall, but they didn't. They just built around it. Entombed it, John corrected. And you got in? Lamar said. Charlie nodded confirmation. No way, he said. What was it like? Marla asked. Exactly the same, John said. It was like everyone vanished, Charlie said softly. I want to go too. You have to take us, Marla said. Jessica cleared her throat hesitantly, and they all looked at her. I don't know, she said slowly. I mean, today? Should we? We have to see it, Lamar said. You can't just tell us this and then not let us see it. I want to see it, Jason chimed in. What's Freddy's? They ignored him. His eyes were wide and he was hanging on to every word. Maybe Jessica's right, John said with reluctance. Maybe it's disrespectful to go tonight. There was a moment's pause, and Charlie knew they were waiting for her to talk. She was the one they were really afraid of offending. They needed her permission. I think we should go, she said. I don't think it's disrespectful. It's almost a way of honouring what happened. She looked around the table. Jessica was nodding. Charlie wasn't sure if it was much of an argument, but they didn't seem to need convincing. They wanted an excuse. Marla twisted herself to look back at Jason's plate. Are you done eating? She said. Yup, he said. Marla pointed to the game in his hand. You know you can't play that during the ceremony, she said. Yup. I'm serious, Jason. I'm locking it in the car. Why don't you just lock me in the car? He muttered. I'd love to, Marla said under her breath, and she turned back to the group. Okay, we can go.